Everyone hits a bump in the road. What do you do with it? Be inspired as we explore the ways people experience, navigate, and manage the ups and downs and twists and turns in this road trip called life. Judy Pearson is a remarkable person. As an award-winning author, her books explore topics ranging from wolves at the door, a World War II story about Virginia Hall, who was one of the architects of the resistance, to It's Just Hair, a collection of thought-provoking pieces of wisdom. She's also a member of the Society of Integrative Oncology, a member of the American Psychosocial Oncology Society, and a founding board member of Arizona Women for the Arts, and so much more. Judy, I am so glad to have you on the show today. If you would, give our listeners a little bit of background about you and about your bump in the road.
Absolutely, absolutely. I am a published author and just finished my fourth book, in fact, which comes out in January of 2021. And in 2011, I was a newlywed. My son was about to deploy to Afghanistan, so of course the mommy nerves were a little bit on edge. And then I heard the words that no one expects: "You have cancer." And I knew very little about cancer, as most of us find ourselves, because until you actually have had the disease or a loved one has, you don't even know what you don't know. And when the biopsy results came back, the surgeon said it's triple negative breast cancer, which at the time didn't mean anything to me. But because I research as a profession, because I write nonfiction books, I was astounded that triple negative breast cancer is only diagnosed in about 15% of all breast cancer diagnoses. Typically, the those with triple negative are young women, women of color, or women of Ashkenazi Jewish descent. I know for a fact I'm not the first two, and didn't think that I had any Ashkenazi background, so it was pretty rare. And on top of that, I found the lump myself in my cleavage after a clean mammogram. I found this thing. We were watching TV one night, and we were laying in bed. I had a t-shirt on. I reached over and said to my husband, "Hey, feel this," my new husband. And I said, "Is that new?" And of course, he obliged. Most men are willing to feel your boobs up if you let them. And so he touched this and said, "Oh, yeah, that's just crazy." So that was my bump, literally.
So you went through treatment. Did you find that this cancer experience was a real game changer for you? And if so, how?
It was. The surgery revealed, I had a mastectomy. The surgery revealed that there were a number of large tumors buried in the breast tissue. I'm not a very big person, and I sadly never had very big boobs, but there were tumors within the breast that by the time I would have been able to feel them, they would have metastasized. And my mother's sister, in fact, died of metastasized triple negative breast cancer, but I do not have any genetic mutation. So when I heard that news, I thought, okay, there's a reason that I survived. I don't know what that is yet, but I'll figure out what it is, and that's the path I will follow until I'm done. So it absolutely changed my entire perspective. And my husband will tell you that he fell in love with a woman who was a published author, did a lot of public speaking, and he thought that I was really all that in a bag of chips, bless his heart. And but he said because of the cancer, I became more driven, more appreciative of life, but not in a bad way. I always had been appreciative, but now I find new ways to be appreciative. And someone whose mission really, I mean, I feel my mission down into my bones. And with breast cancer, if you've had a mastectomy, you are reminded every time you take off your shirt that you had breast cancer. But I relish life so much, and am forever looking for new ways to enjoy the time God's given me.
No, I'm with you on that. You wrote a book, It's Just Hair, and it's a terrific book. Tell people a little bit about the book and how it's organized.
So I was writing biographies about courageous people that no one had ever heard of, and that's what I've now picked up with again. But in trying to find, I tried to go back to a book I was working on pre-cancer, and that just was like, nah. And so I was thinking that I had relearned, or better learned, a lot of lessons that I had grown up with, like counting your blessings and being patient and being kind, and putting yourself in someone else's shoes. All those things become acutely clear as you're going through a cancer diagnosis and treatment. So my idea was that I would make these lessons short. They're only about 3 or 4 pages each. Um, at one time in my life, I had a syndicated humor column, so kind of like I was an Irma Bombeck wannabe. So there's a lot of humor as well as heartfelt ideas in each of these lessons, and it's called "It's Just Hair" because one of the big things that women freak out about in particular, I don't know if men do, but women do, is losing their hair. And I'm now 9 years out. Not only did I save a ton of money and a ton of time by having no hair for a year, but I never had short hair before, and I love it. I absolutely love my hair, and I would never go back. I mean, I wet it. Either I wash it, or in between days I wet it. I blow it dry for about 2 minutes, and it's done. It's so fun. So that's where the name came from, because that was one of the lessons. And one of my goals, I became very um, focused on the whole giving back concept. So my idea with this book was that the proceeds would go to support nonprofits, or I would provide the book to nonprofits if they put together goodie bags or whatever. That was my whole focus.
I think this idea of giving back is something that hits a lot of us going through something like cancer. Why do you think it is?
Well, um, the statistics about that, because ironically, before cancer, the book that I was working on was a deviation from the biographies, and it was what taught me that I am a storyteller and a biographer. So I had to get back to that. But the book I was writing was about the differences between men's and women's courage, which is also super interesting and could be a whole other podcast. But in doing the research for that, one of the chapters was going to be courage in the face of chronic or catastrophic illness. And there had been significant research done in the first decade of this century, and it's ongoing, about the health benefits of volunteering. And like so often happens, um, somebody does a research project, news gets out. That I just read one yesterday about coffee, that it's okay for us to drink coffee. So you hear it's okay to drink coffee, then you share that with other people, then more research and more blogs are written, and it's just sort of this snowball. So that's what happened with the whole idea of giving back. And even if it's as small, even if it's not organized, and you just simply look over at somebody who's brand new in chemo and say, let me give you a tip. And you tell that person something. And that person is so appreciative, and their warm glow actually releases the feel good hormones within you, oxytocin, which is the connecting hormone, and endorphins. And you feel physically better as a result. So then you do it more. And then sometimes you get more organized in the whole giving back sort of a thing. It happens almost universally, with the exception of people who just decide this is the end and I don't want to go forward. Anybody else who, whether they have been told they have no evidence of disease or that their cancer is something they must live with, every single person who takes one step into that giving back category, which happens probably 90% of the time, that it just keeps going, and you don't even think about doing it for yourself, but the benefits are huge.
I think that's true. I want to go back to the courage topic. That is really interesting. What were some of the differences you found between men and women in terms of courage or how they confronted situations?
There are three big ones, and those two, ironically, I mean, I believe everything, I believe the paths unfold before us, bumps in the road and all, as they are planned. Whether you believe in God, the universe, the good fairy, Mother Nature, it all unfolds as it's been planned. And so that research on courage, led to so many other things after my diagnosis. So one of the things that I thought was so fascinating, and this came from interviewing so many different people, hundreds of people, politicians, a Supreme Court justice, the head of the World Bank Organization, and just everyday people. Um, women women approach tasks, or approach challenges in a very collaborative way. We, by nature rather, want to help. I think it's our hormones. We can't help ourselves. We're supposed to nurture children, so that just works. So we want to collaborate, we want to nurture, and we want to communicate. And that's how we go about just about everything, again, relating it back to cancer, including our own diagnosis and treatment. Men, on the other hand, and again, not wanting to step on anybody's belief toes, but if you think about, eons ago, whatever that means for you, whether it's biblical eons or scientific eons, women were left to care for the homestead and the children, the offspring, while men spent their days in very solitary situations, protecting, hunting. They had to be tough. Even when they were with others, they took on a very solo persona. And, thousands of movies have been written and produced about men not wanting to talk about their feelings, not wanting to go to any kind of therapy. I mean, it's humorous the way it goes. And as the mother of two sons, and a sister with only one brother, and lots of husbands. No, really, I really think that can be exemplified. And when it comes to cancer, what I've seen, if you separate the genders and have support groups, workshops, whatever you want to call it, that's way more important than separating cancers. Certainly, each of us has different physical issues as a result of where our cancer was, but we are still whatever gender we are. And so, when with my nonprofit, when we do workshops, we get so much discussion and conversation that could never go on in mixed company. And when I speak to groups that are of mixed genders, and I ask a question or I tell a joke, those questions and jokes that get lots of responses when it's just women, kind of everybody goes and looks in their lap. So it's just the way we are, and there's nothing wrong with that. Someone once said to me that it's true. Women are way more interested in doing things together and in healing together. Men heal on the ball field, the golf course, with a hammer in their hands, at Habitat for Humanity. Those are generics. I don't mean to step on anyone's toes. I know that it can go either way for individuals, but in general, that seems to be the way that it falls out.
You started a group called Courage Concepts, didn't you?
That was actually the name of my little company when I was speaking publicly. But the
Hmm.
group that I started is called A Second Act,
Okay.
and its whole focus is on the notion that there is healing and helping.
I like the idea of a second act because I think for many people, particularly in cancer, and second act deals with cancer, I think you reach a fork in the road, and it's almost a binary choice. You can go one way, which is the dark night of the soul, and you may or may not survive it, quite honestly. And the other way, I think, is to use this as a pivot into a more conscious and meaningful life. And I think to the extent that we can choose the latter, uh, it can be really revolutionary. I mean, I look at my life before and after cancer. I like my life now so much better.
I get it. I totally get it. And for us, a second act doesn't have to be organized. It doesn't have to be big. You don't have to have created anything unless that's your thing. And it doesn't even have to be cancer related. So, of the hundreds of women I've met, and of the more than 50 who've told their stories on our stages during our annual fundraising events, um, we've had domestic violence, prison reform, um, other types of family issues that need to be addressed, keeping the men in the families, even if the family unit isn't together, education, fitness. I mean, it's really, really remarkable.
That's incredible. I didn't realize it went beyond cancer, and those are all such good causes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it truly is. It doesn't matter. It's whatever makes your heart sing and takes the focus off you and off of your really crummy situation. Because let's face it, it doesn't matter how small your tumor was or how short-lived your treatment was. It's a huge thing to hear those words. So whatever can get you out of that shell and out of that persona and get you looking forward, that's all that matters. And I'm all about not reinventing the wheel. There are so many wonderful support organizations and and nutrition classes and fitness classes for patients or cancer survivors. So for us, second acts, that's all we do. We do girls' night out activities, we do workshops, and we'll do that again when the pandemic is over, because I believe it will be one day. We publish a book that is a compilation of the stories of the gals who've been in our storytelling events. And you can go to our website and see every single one of their individual videos as they presented it on stage. And we just had a board meeting last night. This year's show is going to be held next year virtually. We're going to record them in a studio and then do a virtual event.
You know, storytelling and words are so powerful. As an author, you're probably very, very aware of that. There are words that surround cancer, survivor, warrior, all these words. What do you think of the verbiage we use to describe this experience?
Well, as a result of the book that I have coming out the first of the year, an organization called the National Coalition for Cancer Survivorship was founded in 1986 and completely changed the course for cancer survivors around the world. They happened to be American, but the first thing that they said, and it was a group of 24 individuals who all had a relationship with cancer, either as having gone through the experience, been a co-survivor, or been in the medical community. And they said, first of all, there's no magic 5 years. You become a cancer survivor at the moment of diagnosis, because that's when you start surviving cancer. It isn't when you get the cupcake or the balloon or the badge. Because let's face it, if you survive 5 years, if you make it to the 5-year mark and you get that little ribbon that says, okay, now you're a survivor, and the next day you get another diagnosis, does that mean you're no longer a survivor? It's too crazy.
No. I've always thought that time limitation was so arbitrary, and for many people out there, there is not a lot of support in the cancer community. You know, in these rarer cancers, unusual cancers. I think the breast cancer community has been stellar in terms of how they have banded together to provide the support that mostly women need, because breast cancer is primarily a female disease, though not exclusively. And I like the idea that it does go on for a long forever, your survivorship or whatever you want to call it, because the psychological and social physical aspects of this don't magically disappear at year 5.
No. And that's been a big statement that I've made all this time, is that cancer doesn't end when treatment does. That was also a point that this group brought to light nearly 35 years ago. And that was that the post treatment time of your life, you're working so hard to get to a point where either your cancer is being managed, or you're told you are in remission or have no evidence of disease. But it doesn't stop. The post treatment part of your life, the rest of your life, survivorship, that's part of the whole continuum. And it should have the greatest amount of focus, because if you fought so hard to live, what's the good of that if you can't make the best use of the time you've been given? Why go through all that in the beginning if you can't then have a great rest of your life, however many days that is? Let's face it, the clock's ticking for all of us, whether our cancer gets us, a truck on the freeway gets us, or our time is just up. So this group really changed the trajectory for us. The words thing is also interesting. And I just have to say, in 1986, there was still horrific discrimination against people with a cancer diagnosis. You didn't talk about it because you could lose your job. You could lose insurance if you had it. You couldn't go into the military. You couldn't adopt children. Child survivors couldn't get roommates in college. It was horrible. It was truly the venereal disease of the 20th century. It was crazy. So anyway, the whole word thing, the warrior, the war, the fighting, the victory, I think that works for some people. I had a very dear friend who was also a writer, and she wrote an article about "Keep Your Hands Off My Cancer." And she had metastatic disease. And so part of the blog was about, don't tell me to eat mushrooms. Don't tell me to, plant a St. Christopher's in a full moon facing south. Don't tell me to do any of those things. I got that. And furthermore, don't tell me I can win the fight, because if my cancer is never going away, does that mean I've lost the fight? Or if I die, have I lost the fight? That's a harsh judgment. But for some people, those words are very useful. And for some people, those words are very forceful and very encouraging. And in fact, in It's Just Hair, so while I was going through my treatment, and my son was in Afghanistan, and it was almost, I started before he left, and he came back after I'd finished, a couple months after I'd finished. But he sent some really powerful emails about our common focus, which was fighting an enemy, and about keeping ourselves strong. And so I included those, with his permission, in one of the chapters. That it's called, actually, A Warrior's Words, and they're very sweet and very. They were just very meaningful, and I'm happy to say he came back healthy and whole, and actually served one more deployment, a 1-year deployment to the Middle East. And next March, he will have put 20 years in with the Air Force, and already has his next job lined up, so that he can afford to support his mother and stepfather in the
What a wonderful son.
Yeah, they both are. They truly are.
One thing I like to ask everybody is, if you could rewrite your story, would you?
I would not in a million years. Starting with, I made the joke earlier about husbands. My first husband gave me my children, my sons. My second husband filled in when their father kind of went AWOL. And this amazing man is the one that I really have fallen head over heels in love with. So I wouldn't change a thing for myself or my children or now my grandchildren. I wouldn't change the fact that I had cancer. I know some people really bristle at the idea that it was a gift. And that's okay. You don't have to agree with that.
No, it goes back to words
It
again,
does.
and it's so interesting to see our reactions
Yep.
to these words that society uses.
But I don't believe that in every life crisis and or challenge, we can't find something, some treasure in that wreckage. One of the gals whose stories is on our website, talks about her son committing suicide, and that along with her cancer and the death of her husband really changed her path. So even someone facing all that tragedy can see that there was treasure in her wreckage.
I'm just fascinated by the stories of how people dig deep.
Yep.
It just amazes me.
It's I mean, there's, like you said earlier, there's two ways you can go. You can hide under the cover with a box of jelly donuts and a bottle of or you can say, okay, this is a really crappy situation I've been dealt, but it is what it is, and I owe it to those still with me, those who are no longer with me, and to myself to move forward. It's just that's the view I've taken anyway.
If you could give a bit of advice to anybody facing a bump in the road, in addition to moving forward, what would you tell them?
I tell people this all the time, and lately, it's my adorable granddaughter who is a sophomore in college. Whenever things are really awful and it seems like is no tomorrow, I actually have two things that I tell her and tell everybody. First of all, you can even eat an elephant a bite at a time. And I even figured it out. You really can. It would take you like 22 months if you had an elephant steak at the end or every night. But at the end of the 22 months, you'd have nothing left but tusks and tail and toenails. So breaking things into small digestible parts makes it easier. Don't look at, oh my God, how am I going to do this for another year? Look at getting through today. That's all you have to do. And then that kind of leads into the second one, which is a less lengthy explanation, but it's always my mantra: not forever, just for now. So when my son was deployed and my granddaughter missed him so much, we would talk all the time. And I'd say, you know what, sweetie, it's not forever. It's just for now. I think the same thing is true no matter what challenge you're facing. Again, it's don't try to look at the end. Don't imagine all the good or all the bad that's facing you. Just, eyes on the prize, and the prize is only today. And maybe today's too long. Maybe it's just this hour or a few hours.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you found something in today's podcast that inspires you along your own life path, because sometimes a bump in the road is actually a portal into a more conscious and meaningful life. Bump in the Road is a production of Cancer Road Trip. Subscribe to the podcast, follow us on social media at Cancer Road Trip, and you can learn more at www.cancerroadtrip.com. Until next time, be safe and be well.